What's up, Soul Fam? If you're struggling, if you struggle, if you've ever struggled with addiction, with substance use addiction or disorders, like whether or not is ever official diagnosis, if you've had problems with shit of that nature, using and abusing, trying to escape, or just trying to function, trying to fit in, trying to have friends, trying to be accepted by your family. Addiction tends to run in families a lot as well. And, I don't know as much about like process addictions and eating disorders, but from what I understand, it's, similar parts of the brain that are active. These things aren't a character flaw, dude. They're not something wrong with you. Ultimately, each of us is responsible for our own recovery, for our own choices, but when it involves pain, like pain receptors and our brain chemistry and these things, especially our belief system about who we are, about whether or not we're worthy of love, especially, that's the big one. These things are generally they're wired into our brain differently. And if you have, there's different types of alcoholism as well. One of them is allergic alcoholism. And in this, it affects, and it's caused by many, the addiction science is very infantile. It's like baby science. They hardly know anything about it yet. For thousands of years, it's been seen as like a character disorder, or it was seen as being possessed by demons and, this, that, and the other thing. Sometimes there's overlap. Sometimes addicts are shitty people. Sometimes addiction causes good people to do shitty things. Sometimes addictions turn good people into shitty people and criminals and evil motherfuckers. Trust me, I've seen it. I've been around them. And a lot of that is what got me out of that world too. Because I couldn't bring myself to do the kind of shit that other people were doing that were in my periphery and circles. Not people I was close with, but I mean, when anyways, people would act like somebody's friend and then rob them when they were in the bathroom, especially dealing with hard drugs and stuff, dude. There's some horrific behaviors out there. Sometimes people just do it and then they feel bad about it. Sometimes, you do that long enough though, and your conscience starts to erase. Or if you get desperate enough for the drugs, especially hard drugs, dude, it really does consume people's lives. So it's, there's overlap, but what we know now about brain chemistry and body chemistry, I have ADHD and other underlying issues as well as allergic type of alcoholism and addiction. The whole field of addiction medicine is extremely complex and constantly evolving. But I also have something called MTHFR, lovingly referred to as the motherfucker gene mutation that many of us with Northern European ancestry have. And it affects the way that our livers break down not only alcohol, but also B vitamins and methylating B vitamins and our detox pathways. And so these things are deeply affected by alcohol and other substances. And when you have allergic type of addiction or alcoholism, this interesting thing happens in your brain chemistry where a lot of times what a drug, and this can be across the board, it can be with specific things, but for me it's almost completely across the board. When I take a substance that affects most people in one way, it does the opposite thing to me. Like if I drink, people think I'm on cocaine. Like hyper manic, crazy. And to say nothing of the things I've done when I was in a blackout drunk. Luckily I never hurt anybody badly, dude. I got a DUI one time, and I had to take classes for a year because of it, and I'm so glad that I did. The Mothers Against Drunk Driving and the stories that they told of children and families and people getting killed by drunk drivers, absolutely no fault of their own, dude. That was so heartbreaking. And I never drove drunk again. I think I might have drove buzzed one other time years after that. But I started to get into recovery at different levels, like a year and a half, maybe 2 years after that. But it's horrific what things can happen. But for people with some of these things, especially if you do have this gene mutation, it's a lot more prominent. We don't detox many things the same way as normal bodies do. It's in our liver. They found some of this stuff out in the 80s and the 90s. 7 Weeks to Sobriety by Joanne Larson, and Depression Free Naturally. She talks a lot about brain chemistry and natural things to like heal your brain and your body. Were really, really good books. She lost a son to alcoholism, and he took his own life. But these things are generally extremely complex chemical issues in our body. Rarely are they like a character defect, or people don't drink and use drugs because they're evil from the outset. Usually people are doing that to cope or to function or whatever the purpose may be, because it was an effective way to manage things at a certain point. And usually the reason they're having a hard time managing things when they're a teenager or in their 20s is because they grew up with trauma and dysfunction. And what they know now, like underneath 98% of addiction and substance use disorders in particular, is trauma. Undiagnosed complex trauma in most cases. Sometimes physical PTSD from single incident, like severe trauma, which can happen. But usually the people that develop that already had undiagnosed trauma, neglect, etc. from childhood. It's extremely complex, dude. And if you spent your whole life just feeling like there's something wrong with you and it's your fault and you deserve this and that and the other thing, like, throw that shit out, man. Throw that shit out. You know, only you has the power to change it, you know, and get help if you need it. Like, it's one of the biggest things that make addictions go on and on and on and on and on is shame and feeling like we don't deserve help and we don't deserve love. And that's because of the fucked up beliefs that our parents put in us, usually. That's what it is. There's a lot of people out there. There's a lot of organizations, and not all of them are going to work for everybody. You know, AA, NA, a lot of the 12-step programs, like they can be very valuable, but there's also a lot of really unhealthy people in a lot of groups. And so, you know, many people go in and they have a couple of bad experiences and they never want to go back again. Same with churches. Same with spiritual organizations. It's especially tough when you're in a tender spot and you're in a vulnerable spot and you're going in, you're trying to find healing. And then to be abused in those situations like you were in your fucking life that led into the addiction, it can like compound the impact, like compound the trauma you already have that might not be diagnosed and make healing that much harder to them. But don't beat up on yourself, man. Don't beat up on yourself. That's the thing that ends up killing most of us. Shame, self-hatred, being too hard on ourselves the way that we were treated. And you know, I've been doing this for a little bit. I've lost a lot of people, like in and out of recovery through addiction. I don't totally agree with the disease model, but there's a large element of truth, and it deserves to be treated like a medical condition and not like a moral issue. When people are committing actual crimes in support of their addiction and destructive behaviors and stuff like that, that needs to be dealt with. But to me, in the legal sense, like, no drugs should not be illegal. Look at all the countries in Europe where it's been legalized and treated like medically. The rates of abuse have gone way down, way down. Rates of overdose, deaths, like all that kind of stuff, diseases, everything associated with people that use like IV substances, all those things go way down when it's legalized. Ultimately, sovereignty. Like, we have the right to put whatever the fuck we want into our own bodies if it's not harming anybody else. And society trying to control it the way that it does here in the United States, the way that has traditionally, does more harm to society and individuals than any good that comes out of that. You know, the government should be should be minding its own fucking business for the most part, and keeping a light touch. But I believe in freedom ultimately, and I always I always said, I always said that I would fight in a war, like I'd give my life for it, for the freedom for people to use substances and put whatever they want into their own body. This is back in my using years, but I still pretty much hold to that. I'm not saying I want a free for all fucking everywhere, but that's not what happens when things are legalized. You give people freedom and treat them like adults, and generally they use it well. When people are respected, they return that, and they respect themselves. But this is back when I was like, still smoking pot and everything, like way back in the day. And I never thought I'd live to see the day. Like, they started legalizing it everywhere medically first, like here in California, and spread to a bunch of other states, and then recreationally, like now pretty much everywhere. I don't know. It doesn't matter to me. I quit smoking when I was like pretty early in my addiction, when I started using other hard stuff, because of that effect that I mentioned earlier. That it would just make me like so anxious and paranoid, and I had some bad LSD trips, and it would give me really bad flashbacks, and it wasn't the thing for me. But I found speed, and because the ADD and all the other stuff, speed actually calmed me down and made me able to focus, and have relationships and conversations, like kind of for the first time in my life. It's really weird. I didn't know about the ADD or anything until like 3 years ago, when I started learning about trauma and all this other stuff. Anyways, dude, be gentle on yourself. A lot of this stuff is biochemical. It's brain chemistry. A lot of it's like people's livers and kidneys and other organs. Some of them process things in very different ways. The allergic type of alcoholism creates a substance in our brains. When they first discovered this, is because they had done they had dissected the brains of some people on Skid Row here in LA, and found a bunch of them. It looked like they had been doing heroin. And this is back when heroin was really expensive. It wasn't a street drug. There was no fentanyl or anything back then. It's like in the 80s. They're like, that's so weird. These people it's like they've been doing a bunch of heroin, but they were like severe alcoholics. And that's when they found out the thing about the liver in allergic type of alcoholism. It creates severe inflammation in the brain, and it causes the body to crave more alcohol to reduce the sensation of the inflammation. Which is why, for some of us, it creates like that kind of like manic state instead of being a depressant. Amphetamines calm me down instead of stimulating me, and so on and so forth. Not every single thing ever did that to me, but the big ones. Brain chemistry is a whole thing, dude, and underneath all of it is trauma, dude. If you're suffering with addiction, if you're struggling. If you've struggled in the past, if you've been sober for a while and you're fucking miserable and you don't know why, there's probably trauma. There's probably trauma under there. It's underneath almost every single form of addiction, man. I've lost so many people, man. I've seen so many good people check out or just be consumed or be killed during the wild times. It's been a big part of my journey. It's kind of funny, dude. Even when I was a kid, even when I was like 14 and 15 and just discovering alcohol and cannabis, I always knew I was going to be sober one day. I always knew I'd get sober one day. But then there was also part of me that never thought I would live to see 30. I thought 30 was fucking ancient, dude. This is back when this is like Nirvana. Nirvana was really big back then. I remember the day he took his life, man. It's brutal. I remember so much about that weekend, what was going on. I was living in Michigan at the time. I see people with Nirvana shirts now all the time here in LA. I'm like, have you actually ever listened to their music? Do you know who that is? Because some of the people wearing them, it's like, it's funny. It's funny, some people. But if you're struggling, dude, if you want to reach out, feel free. I love to support people in recovery on any level. Just as a friend. I do coaching and stuff too, but I've been involved in all kinds of healing work and trauma work more recently. which is a big passion of mine, but helping people in recovery is really core to my heart and my mission, my work here on Earth. And there's no shortage of people that are hurting right now, but that shame and the silence that can bind us to, that's the real killer. They say resentment is the number one killer of alcoholics, but it's shame, it's self-hatred. It's the belief that we deserve it. We deserve to suffer. We don't deserve love. We don't deserve connection, because that's what we were told for so long, in one way or another. Not always by our parents. Society sends a lot of messages too that we're not good enough. We're not good enough. We need to produce. We need to buy more things. Different versions of this for women and men, but they both come down to you're not good enough. You're not good enough. You're not good enough, and that's bullshit. You're absolutely good enough. God loves you, 100%. I love you, 100%. If you're struggling, it doesn't make you a bad person. It means you probably fucking care still. You probably still love yourself. That spark is still in there. You still have a conscience. That's a good sign. Some people cast that aside along the road. Doggy sigh. I love being with this girl. Attuned. She's helped me attune my nervous system really powerfully, really slowly over the last couple of years. Animals can be really, really healing too, for trauma and such. But yeah, if you're struggling, man, reach out for help. Therapists can be great. Healing groups can be great. Recovery groups of many kinds. They're all over the place. There's a cool what's the name of that website or app? Meetup. Meetup has tons and tons of groups, pretty much every city in the country. So you can find all kinds of stuff in there, and not just recovery stuff, but like cool meetups, like seemingly really obscure groups that you can nerd out with and stuff like that. Like literature groups, book groups, like all kinds of things. But don't suffer in silence, man. Addiction is not your fault. Like, what we do with it is up to us. It's up to us. And if we've hurt other people during our addiction, we have to clean that up. I feel like regardless of if you're in a 12-step program or anything else, dude, if we don't clean that stuff up, if we don't take accountability and make amends to people that we hurt, it's going to eat at us. The guilt is if we're truly on that path, of recovery, got to make those amends. I love you guys. Hope you're having a great day.